I woke up before my alarm, for no reason I could name. The air in the room felt still, too still, like the world outside had paused for a breath it would never release. I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, and noticed the faintest glow leaking around the edges of the curtains, pale, colorless, like the light of a dying candle. There was no birdsong, no distant hum of cars, no wind rattling the windows. Only a thin, unnatural silence that made my chest tighten. Something was wrong. I stood and crossed the cold wooden floor, each step creaking louder than it should have, and pulled the curtain back. The sky was neither dark nor bright. It was a heavy slate of deep gray, dense and inert, as if the atmosphere itself had forgotten how to breathe. And where the sun should have been, that golden anchor of all mornings, there was only a soft void, a hole punched into the day, black and bottomless. The light that lingered had a strange weight to it, as if it were not truly light at all, but the ghost of illumination, traveling towards me across the gulf of minutes already lost. In that instant, without yet understanding why, I felt a deep, instinctive loneliness settle into my bones, as if I had been abandoned not just by the sun, but by time itself. I stepped outside, and the cold hit me like a whispering tide slipping beneath my skin. The ground underfoot was damp with dew that hadn't yet decided whether to freeze or evaporate. The street stretched empty before me, houses standing silent and blind, their windows staring into the gray. Somewhere far off, a car alarm blared weakly, a meaningless cry in a world suddenly emptied of context. They say it takes 8 minutes and 20 seconds for sunlight to reach Earth, that even if the sun were to vanish without warning, we would still bask in its final rays for those last 8 minutes, ignorant of the abyss rushing toward us. 8 minutes, the lifetime of a dream, the distance between life and death, masquerading as an ordinary morning. I looked up again, half expecting, half hoping, to see some mistake, some flaw in the sky's blank expression. But there was only that eerie, colorless half-light, and the growing certainty, cold and metallic, that the world had already been severed from its star. We just hadn't realized it yet. The thought sent a tremor through me. Every leaf, every drop of water clinging to the gutters, every whispered breath of mist, all of it existed now in a borrowed moment, an illusion painted by photons already untethered from their source. I imagined them, those last particles of light, racing across space toward us like messengers who knew the truth but were powerless to change it. Messengers carrying not warmth or life, but a final farewell. I could feel it then, the turning of something vast and invisible, a deep, planetary shudder, not of the Earth itself, but of the invisible web that had always bound us to the sun. Gravity, light, certainty, unraveling, one silent strand at a time. In my mind's eye, I pictured the Earth as a ship, beautiful and fragile, slipping its moorings and beginning to drift into the cold, dark sea of space, rudderless and alone. The world we knew was already behind us. The world ahead was one we were not meant to survive. And yet, standing there barefoot on the cold concrete, feeling the last breath of a dying sky against my face, I realized something strange. I was not afraid. Not yet. Some part of me, ancient and stubborn, still believed in the constancy of the sun, in the inviolability of dawn. As if all this, the silence, the darkness, the growing void, could still be explained away, could still be undone with the coming of morning. I turned my face upward, closed my eyes against the dead sky, and waited foolishly for the warmth that would not come. Somewhere, a clock ticked on. Somewhere, the last beams of a vanished star were threading their way across the cold, blind vacuum toward my skin. Somewhere, just beneath the surface of the world, the first seeds of panic were stirring. The sun had disappeared. We just hadn't caught up to the truth yet. When it finally happened, when the last rays of the sun dissolved into the hollow sky, it was not with a bang or a shudder, but with a strange, weightless surrender. The world simply tilted, imperceptibly, as if reality had loosened its grip. I watched as the color drained from the landscape, not fading into night, but collapsing into something deeper, older, something the mind had no word for. Above me, the moon flickered once, a pale ghost losing its borrowed brilliance, and then went dark. It was sudden, like a candle pinched between fingers. The stars sharpened into fierce, cold points, but they offered no comfort. Their light felt thin, brittle, like reflections glimpsed in shattered glass. Around me, The city seemed to hold its breath. Streetlights blinked on one by one, their hums and flickers standing in pathetic defiance against the infinite dark pressing down from above. I heard the whine of engines revving in panic, the staccato rhythm of hurried footsteps on empty sidewalks, the first brittle notes of confusion beginning to splinter into fear. Somewhere a child cried out, high, sharp, a sound too small to answer the vastness overhead. I stood frozen, listening to the world realize that something sacred, something foundational, had come undone. The earth, they had once said, is tethered to the sun by the same bond that tethers every star, every planet, every grain of cosmic dust: gravity. A bond so enduring, so absolute, that we rarely think of it at all. We are like fish who cannot imagine the water that sustains them. And now, with the sun gone, that bond was fraying. Not immediately, but inevitably. Gravity, like light, moves at the speed of causality, and so we had 8 minutes, no more, before the Earth's orbit would break, and we would be cast adrift into the endless black. In those 8 minutes, the illusion of safety still clung stubbornly to the world. Radios buzzed with confused news anchors struggling to explain the unexplainable. Planes continued to carve ghostly trails across the thinning atmosphere. Children stared blankly at television screens that flickered and jittered like the dying heartbeat of a wounded creature. And in every human heart, somewhere deep and wordless, a question began to burn. What happens now? The cold came quickly, not a sharp, biting cold, but a slow, encroaching numbness that rose from the bones of the earth itself. I felt it underfoot, a deep vibration, a sigh that seemed to say, I can no longer hold you. Tiny crystals formed on the edges of windows, intricate and fragile, like the first tentative sketches of an artist unsure of the final vision. Breath became visible in the air, pale and fleeting. Skin prickled with a raw, instinctive memory of winters older than cities, older than history. The moon was gone. The sun was gone. The world was adrift, no longer turning around a center, but falling, elegantly and helplessly, into the unknown. I imagined the earth from above, a marble losing its place on the board, slipping free, carried forward by inertia into a night that had no morning on the other side. And yet, even in this new darkness, the stars still sang. Their light, indifferent and ancient, poured down in silent waves, whispering of distances and ages far beyond human grief. I stood there, letting the faint starlight dust my skin, and felt a strange, almost reverent awe. We had lost our sun, but the universe remained. The first night had begun, and it would not end. In the days that followed, the world began to decay in ways so quiet, so intimate, it was easy to mistake them for something else. A colder winter, a longer night, a momentary forgetting. But the truth seeped into everything like a slow, invisible poison. The trees were the first to betray it. Their branches, once straining upward with 1,000 tiny hopes, now hung limp against the darkening sky. The leaves, unable to drink the vanished light, turned inward, curling in silent resignation. Forests that had whispered with life became graveyards of motionless silhouettes, their once green canopies sagging into brittle, ash-colored veils. Photosynthesis, that ancient miraculous alchemy, had ceased the moment the sun died. Without the steady pulse of sunlight threading energy into the fabric of every blade of grass, every towering oak, every hidden root, the chain unraveled. Plants, stripped of their life force, began to starve. Their colors dulled, their tissues grew thin. I would walk past familiar gardens and see them as if through a fog. Roses slumped in their beds, vines hanging slack over empty trellises, grasses lying flat like hair on the scalp of a dying planet. It was a silent collapse at first, almost gentle, but soon the collapse roared upward through the food chain. Herbivores, those soft-eyed grazers who had trusted in the abundance of the earth, found their fields barren. They searched, wandered, starved. Some lay down quietly among the withered stalks, as if they could not bear to stand anymore in a world that no longer recognized them. Predators, in turn, thinned and turned savage, fighting not for territory but for scraps of what had once been life. I saw it with my own eyes. A fox, once proud and fierce, reduced to a shadow stalking the frozen streets, its breath rising in thin wisps that vanished into the star-choked sky. The oceans, too, began to fail. Beneath their surface, plankton, the invisible gardens of the deep, faltered. With no sunlight to guide them, they withered, collapsing the vast marine pyramids of life that had risen upon their tiny shoulders. Schools of fish dispersed like smoke, leaving behind the hollowed silence of a once symphonic sea. Along the beaches, the air grew sharper, heavier, tinged with the scent of salt and decay. For us, the humans, it was a different kind of dying. We clung longer. We had cities, fire, memory. We could barricade ourselves against the cold for a time. But even inside our walls, the world was closing in. Crops failed, supply lines broke. Markets, schools, governments, all the intricate weavings of our civilization began to unravel under the invisible weight of a dying ecosystem. People grew thinner, tempers shorter. Hope, once woven into our songs and our prayers and our stories, began to fray at the edges. And then came the cold. Not the sharp, invigorating cold of autumn, but a deep, paralyzing stillness that soaked into the marrow of the earth itself. Each morning was colder than the last. Water froze in the pipes. Frost spread like a white fungus across windows and doors. Our breath became a visible tether, tying us briefly to the world before vanishing into it. The silence grew thicker, heavier, broken only by the occasional crack of splitting ice or the low, hopeless wail of wind through abandoned streets. I would walk sometimes, when I could bear it, through the skeletal remains of the parks and avenues. The air tasted thin and metallic. My boots crunched through layers of brittle debris. Dead leaves, frozen grass, the brittle feathers of birds who had not understood that the sky had betrayed them. Sometimes, when I closed my eyes, I could almost hear it, the faint echo of a heartbeat that no longer belonged to anything living. The living world was dying, and we were dying with it. By the end of the first year, the earth had become something unrecognizable. Not the vibrant, defiant sphere that once pirouetted around its golden star, but a silent monument of ice, drifting blind through a cosmos too vast to notice. The temperature had fallen beyond the reach of memory, beyond the reach of most life. The oceans, once heaving with the breath of a billion creatures, now lay still beneath a prison of ice so thick it blurred the boundary between water and stone. The waves had frozen mid-gesture, their restless yearning caught forever in a moment of arrested motion. I remember standing at the edge of what had once been a river, the banks drawn back like the lips of a mouth frozen mid-scream. The water was solid now, a gray-white vein threading through the dead landscape, glinting under the indifferent starlight. Ice flowers, fragile, crystalline, intricate beyond comprehension, blossomed across its surface in sprawling colonies, each more beautiful and more lifeless than the last. I knelt to touch them once. They shattered beneath my fingertips like ancient porcelain. The sky was a cold, hard thing, no longer a dome of sheltering blue, but a ceiling of endless black, studded with a billion tiny fires burning too far away to warm us. The stars seemed closer now, crueler somehow in their beauty, as if they were watching, impassive, as we shivered and diminished beneath them. The air itself had changed, thinning, crackling with static, heavy with the absence of all the scents we once took for granted. No rain on asphalt, no cut grass, no blooming jasmine in the twilight, only the sharp metallic bite of ice and the dry mineral ghost of frozen earth. The cities, stripped of power and purpose, slumped like broken skeletons against the deepening cold. Windows cracked and splintered from the pressure of expanding ice. Steel beams, once proud in their geometry, buckled and moaned under the strain. Roads heaved and split like old scars. Cars, abandoned where they had died, sat entombed in frost, their windshields blind and glistening. Streetlights flickered dimly for a time, their bulbs feeding on the last fumes of a dead grid, until they too succumbed to the dark. Inside the hollow bones of human settlements, small pockets of warmth still flickered. Stubborn, defiant things. Bonfires made from scavenged furniture, underground generators coughing life into subterranean refuges, the soft orange halos of human breath and desperation pooling in frozen courtyards. But each day, each night, the reach of the cold grew longer, stronger, more certain. Heat leaked from every crack, every seam, until it felt as if even thought itself might freeze in the still air. The earth, losing its final borrowed warmth, began to transform. The atmosphere thickened with strange precipitation. At first snow, then frost so fine it seemed to hover in the air. Then, as temperatures plunged further, crystals of oxygen and nitrogen condensing out of the thinning sky. I saw it happen once, standing on a barren hillside where once wildflowers had grown. It began as a whisper, a shimmering mist curling down from the black heavens, settling on the ground like a soft sigh. It dusted the ruins, the dead trees, the silent streets, not with snow, but with the frozen breath of the planet itself. We had entered a new kind of winter. Not a season, but an era. A permanent, absolute coldness where the very gases that once gave us life turned to dust beneath our feet. The oceans, even now, clung to life deep below their frozen armor, insulated by layers of ice and the stubborn heat of the Earth's core. Somewhere, far below, blind creatures still drifted near hydrothermal vents, living as they had for eons, untouched by the dramas of the surface. To them, the death of the sun meant nothing. But for us, it was everything. Our world had become a tomb of lightless beauty, a crystal sarcophagus sailing endlessly through the dark, and inside it, small, fragile echoes of what we once were. Breathing, remembering, waiting. Waiting for what? We did not know. Beneath the frozen crust of Earth, life stubbornly flickered on. Not in the open, ruined cities or the withered fields, but in the hollow places, the hidden places, where the ancient heat of the planet still whispered against the deathless cold. We became creatures of the deep, of stone and fire, burrowing down through forgotten subway tunnels, mine shafts, caves carved by hands desperate for one more day. There, in the veins of the earth, we found what little warmth remained, and clung to it like castaways to the wreckage of a sunken ship. The air underground was thick, damp, heavy with the scent of minerals and old water. It tasted of iron and salt and something older still, a primal tang that spoke of Earth's beginnings. Our breath steamed in the dim light of makeshift fires and trembling generators, painting the rock walls with fleeting specters. We moved slowly, bundled in layers of scavenged cloth and synthetic fiber, our movements deliberate, conserving the thin trickle of energy our bodies could still produce. The ground itself seemed alive here, pulsing faintly with the deep, slow heartbeat of geothermal heat. We tapped into it where we could, tapping steam vents, rigging crude turbines, building communal chambers around the rare pockets where the planet's lifeblood still rose to kiss the broken surface. The glow of magma far below was a memory we could not reach, but in these refuges it manifested as warmth against our skin, the faint hum of possibility against the crushing silence. Our new cities were no longer cities at all, but labyrinths of survival. Low ceilings of rough stone, narrow tunnels dripping with condensation, caverns lit by the pale blue flicker of salvaged LED lights stretched thin over crumbling infrastructure. The air buzzed with the sound of human voices, quieter now, slower, wrapped in a blanket of cautious hope. Laughter was rare, but when it came, it echoed strangely against the stone, bright and fragile as icicles breaking. Children were born in these depths, under ceilings of rock instead of stars. They grew up without ever seeing the sky, learning of oceans and forests and sunlight as myths passed down in whispered stories. For them, the earth had always been a hushed, dim world of walls and tunnels, of careful footsteps and rationed heat. Their drawings on the cavern walls were strange. Spirals of fire, giant trees they had never touched, suns they had never seen but still dreamed of with a yearning they could not name. And above us, far, far above, the surface lay silent and still, entombed in endless ice, the continents wrapped in brittle sheets of frozen atmosphere. The mountains stood sharper now, their peaks stripped of cloud and storm, naked against the dead sky. Winds, when they came, carried no scent but the biting perfume of frozen air molecules settling into crystalline dust. Cities rested beneath weighted blankets of snow and oxygen ice, perfect and unchanging monuments to the life that once was. Yet, in the dark, beneath all this weight, we endured. There was something fierce in our persistence, something irrational and magnificent. We planted hydroponic gardens lit by stolen energy, tended vats of algae, taught our children songs about a blue planet that had danced once in a golden dawn. We celebrated birthdays, we told jokes, we fought, loved, dreamed. The fire inside us, that impossible inheritance from a sun now lost to history, continued to burn. We became not merely survivors, but stewards of memory, caretakers of a broken world. Our breath, our blood, our stories kept alive the fragile ember of Earth's past, and perhaps, if luck and time allowed, its future. Somewhere in the deepest chambers, a seed library slept in the cool dark, preserving the DNA of trees that would never again feel the kiss of sunlight, of flowers that would never open their faces to the sky. But even as we built these fragile sanctuaries, we knew the truth. The earth was no longer a world for us. It was becoming something else. Something colder, lonelier, stranger than any of us were born to survive. Our fires were small, our numbers dwindling, and the darkness beyond our caverns grew heavier with every passing year. Still we endured, because it is what life does. It endures, even when all reason says it should not. Above us, unseen and unstoppable, the earth had become a ship set loose from its harbor. No longer anchored by the gravity of a star, no longer warmed by the steady hand of a sun, our planet sailed outward into the infinite cold, a lost wanderer in the dark rivers of the galaxy. We moved with silent grace, 30 kilometers every second, stitching an invisible trail across the void, each heartbeat carrying us farther from the place we once called home. Sometimes, in the deep hours of the underground night, I would close my eyes and try to feel it. The motion, the vast and gentle arc of our journey. I would imagine the continents above me slipping past the frozen husks of asteroids, the great ice-bound oceans turning slowly beneath the silent gravity of dead moons. I would imagine the stars themselves, brilliant and pitiless, shifting by infinitesimal degrees in the black canvas beyond, each one a sun too distant to save us. The galaxy around us was not empty. There were rogue planets out there, drifters like us, vast, cold worlds unmoored from any star, wandering the night with no sunrises, no seasons, no certainty. Some, perhaps, were ancient refugees from long-dead systems, carrying in their frozen cores the seeds of vanished civilizations. In the endless tapestry of time, it was not impossible to imagine that we, too, had now joined their ranks, a silent testament to the fragility of worlds, the stubbornness of life. And yet, improbably, there was still a kind of hope. Not the loud, defiant hope we once shouted into the sky with rockets and radios, but a quieter, deeper kind. The hope written into the molecules of every living thing. The blind, persistent yearning to grow, to endure, to reach toward some unseen light. The earth itself, wrapped in its cocoon of ice, carried life deep within its veins. The microbes near the ocean vents, the last gardens of our underground refuges, they pulsed on, ignorant of the vast death above them, driven by instincts older than the stars. Perhaps across millions of years and the breadth of the galaxy, the Earth would pass near another star. Perhaps by some cosmic generosity, we might be captured into a new orbit, thawed by a new sun. Maybe the ice would melt, the oceans breathe again, the atmosphere unfreeze and stir with new winds. Maybe the seeds we buried would find soil once more, and the green hush of forests would return, stitched slowly back into the wounded skin of the world. Or maybe we would sail forever, a ghost planet bearing silent witness to a life that once was. It is strange to think that somewhere out there, millions of years from now, a distant intelligence, alien, human, or something entirely new, might one day find us, might unearth the libraries we sealed in stone, might touch the faded carvings of our hands on cavern walls, might wonder who we were and how we had lived and died in the fleeting warmth of a small yellow star. Standing in the dim corridors of our underground sanctuaries, I sometimes pressed my hand against the stone and tried to listen, not for the echoes of footsteps or the murmur of air vents, but for the deeper music of the earth itself. The slow, ancient heartbeat that still somehow played beneath the ice. It was a sound beyond memory, beyond sorrow, beyond even hope. The simple, enduring fact of existence. We were not the first to vanish into the dark, and we would not be the last. The stars waited, the void waited, and somewhere beyond the reach of vision, perhaps something else waited too, something we had no words for yet, something vast and gentle and terrifying. After all, what if this wasn't the end? What if it was only the beginning?